The sun hung low in the lavender sky, casting long golden rays over the hills of central Italia. Birds trilled quietly in the distance as the breeze rolled across olive trees and cypress groves. Along a narrow winding path, flanked by marble columns and blooming wisteria, a tall figure walked in silence. His name was Lucian Valerius, Emperor of the Illyrian realm. To most of the world, he was a ruler of unmatched authority, commander of armies, overseer of the courts, the architect of peace treaties and city laws. But here, in the lush countryside miles away from the capital of Aurevia, he was simply Lucian. No titles. No robes. Just a man in light linen tunic and worn leather sandals, returning to the one place that felt like home. Nestled among hills and hidden behind layers of pine trees was the estate known as Solarium Villa. It wasn't merely a retreat. It was a world of its own, an escape carefully designed by Lucian himself over decades, as both sanctuary and testament to everything he loved: architecture, tranquility, and the passage of time. He stepped through the grand stone archway, greeted not by guards or officials, but by the cool hush of solitude. The air here was different, crisp, perfumed by nearby citrus trees and the faint minerals of distant springs. His black dog, Myra, padded beside him, tail swishing in quiet joy. Lucian paused at the edge of the central garden. Statues of long-forgotten heroes lined the pathway, moss gently curling over their feet. Vines of violets and golden ivy crowned the heads of marble goddesses. A fountain gurgled softly in the center, and birds perched delicately along its rim, unbothered by his presence. He took a deep breath. After weeks of political unrest in the capital, border skirmishes, Senate conflicts, the fever outbreak, he had finally returned. This was not just a vacation. It was survival. The world expected strength from him every moment. But even emperors bleed silence. Even kings carry invisible wounds. And here, beneath the branches of a cypress tree where dappled sunlight danced like fireflies, Lucian began to breathe again. He wandered slowly along the path toward the east wing of the villa, where the afternoon light bathed the corridor in honey. Each step echoed through time. He had walked these same stones decades ago, as a younger man, dreaming of freedom even while ascending to power. The villa had grown since then. Now a complex of over 30 structures, including meditation chambers, libraries, bathhouses, and even a small observatory. There was a rose maze to the west, and a sacred grove where fireflies gathered each night in swarms that resembled constellations. He remembered designing the grove with his old friend, Cassian, a philosopher and mystic, who had passed away 6 winters ago. His spirit seemed to linger in the leaves. Lucian sat beneath the arch of reflection, a curved stone gateway inscribed with verses in both Illyrian and Old Grecan script. It was a place to sit in silence and remember. As he looked out over the koi pond, he saw himself not as a ruler, but as the boy he once was, wide-eyed, curious, and full of questions no court advisor could answer. That boy still lived within him. And this villa, this sacred refuge, was the only place where he could truly listen. As he closed his eyes, distant echoes from the past began to whisper. He remembered the woman who once stood by his side here, Lyra, with her ink-black hair and voice like summer rain. She had not been seen in years, her fate unknown after the sea rebellion. But some part of him hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the wind still carried her laughter. A sudden gust stirred the leaves around him. Myra raised her head. Then came the sound of bell. Not from the inner sanctum or servants' hall, but from the southern tower, unused for years. Lucian's eyes opened sharply. That bell hadn't rung in over a decade. He stood slowly, the weight of age temporarily forgotten. Someone was here. He moved quickly yet quietly through the corridor, heart thrumming. Myra followed close, ears pricked. Past the colonnade of painted frescoes, past the room of stars until he reached the southern atrium. Empty. But on the smooth stone floor was a single white flower, a lunaria blossom, rare and only found in the far north. Its petals shimmered with silver under the sunlight. Beneath it, a small folded parchment. He picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable. L. You built this sanctuary to find peace, but you also buried your past in it. It is time to remember. Come to the obsidian pool by midnight. L. Lucian's heart pounded not with fear, but with the rising tide of something long buried, hope, and something stranger. Destiny. He folded the note with trembling fingers. Midnight would come soon. And the past, it seemed, was not finished with him yet. Night had fallen gently over the hills of Tibur. The once golden sky had cooled into hues of navy and silver, while stars began to pierce through the velvet veil above. Solarium Villa, though vast, stood quietly under the weight of memory. Torches flickered along the marble corridors, casting dancing shadows on painted walls. Lucian Valerius stood at the edge of the southern garden, facing the distant obsidian pool. The note burned faintly in his tunic pocket, though he had read it over and over in his mind. Come to the obsidian pool by midnight, it had said. Signed simply, L. He had told no one of the message. Not his chamberlain, not the villa steward, not even his most trusted guard, Norris. There was something sacred about it, something beyond politics or power. It felt personal. And personal matters were rare in the life of an emperor. With a deep breath, Lucian crossed the garden path lined with ancient statues, some of them half-cracked, overgrown with moss and ivy, their features softened by centuries of wind and time. This part of the estate was rarely visited. The obsidian pool had once been a meditation site, built over a natural spring known for its dark, mirror-like water and healing properties. But after the incident of shadows, it had been sealed and forgotten. Lucian passed the final statue, an unnamed goddess with outstretched arms, and pushed open the old bronze gate. The obsidian pool lay in silence, surrounded by a stone colonnade covered in creeping night jasmine. Moonlight reflected off the water like silver thread. The scent of lavender and something older, something earthy and ancient hung in the air. He waited. A moment passed. Then another. Silence. And then, a whisper. A voice carried by the wind. Lucian. He turned swiftly, but saw no one. Lucian Valerius. The voice was clearer now. Feminine. Ethereal. The tone carried both warmth and warning. From behind one of the old pillars stepped a figure clad in a deep blue cloak. The hood was pulled low, but Lucian recognized the walk, the shape, the presence. Lyra, he whispered. The woman stopped, lifted her hood. It was her. Older, yes. Her once raven black hair was now streaked with silver, her eyes more shadowed than he remembered. But it was undeniably her. She carried the same presence that had once silenced war rooms and comforted orphans. A healer. A traitor. A ghost. You're alive, Lucian breathed. She didn't smile. That depends on what you mean by alive. They stood in silence. 10 years of unspoken words lingered between them like mist. I searched for you, he said finally. After the rebellion, they said you were executed at sea. They lied, she replied. Or maybe they believed it themselves. Lucian's hands trembled, though he hid them in the folds of his tunic. Why come back now? Lyra looked to the pool. Because something stirs beneath this villa, Lucian. Something you built over but never truly buried. Lucian followed her gaze. The still water of the pool now shimmered faintly with bluish light. This land is older than your empire, she continued. Older than Rome. Older than Elaria. You always sensed it, even when we were young. Lucian said nothing. Memories flooded his mind, visions, dreams he'd had as a boy in this very place, voices beneath the stone, dreams of a silver tree, whispers in forgotten tongues. There's a temple beneath the villa, Lucian, Lyra said. A chamber not on any map. Sealed before your ancestors were born. I had the villa mapped entirely. Not this. Because it hides itself. Because it chooses who can see. Lucian's eyes narrowed. And it's chosen you. I was only the key. You are the door. Before he could reply, a sudden gust of wind swept across the colonnade. The jasmine leaves swirled around them like smoke. The water in the obsidian pool began to ripple, though no stone had fallen in. Lyra stepped closer. Tonight is the equinox. The hidden path will open again for 1 hour. If you want to understand what solarium truly is, what it protects, you must come with me. Lucian hesitated. He thought of the Senate in Orevia, the endless debates and wars waiting on his return. He thought of Myra, still curled in sleep on his chamber floor. He thought of the strange pressure in his chest, the same one he felt every time he left the capital and returned to this land. And then, he stepped forward. I'm coming. Lyra smiled for the first time. Then follow me, Emperor. But not as a ruler. As a seeker. Together, they moved along the garden's edge toward a small, half-collapsed arch Lucian had never noticed before. Ivy covered most of it, but Lyra reached out, brushed aside a cluster of vines, and revealed a glyph etched in obsidian stone. She pressed her palm against it. The air shimmered. The ground beneath them trembled. And then, with a low grinding sound, a hidden stairwell descended into the earth. From above, the villa remained silent. Peaceful. But below, a deeper story began to awaken. One that had slept for centuries. Stone met footstep in a slow, rhythmic cadence as Lucian descended into the earth. The staircase spiraled downward, cut directly into bedrock, slick with centuries of condensation and veiled by moss. Faint blue glyphs glowed along the walls, illuminating the way like fireflies caught in crystal. The air grew cooler, thicker, as if the very oxygen resisted the passage of time. Behind him, Lyra walked in silence, her steps as soft as whispers. Who built this? Lucian asked, breaking the hush. Lyra's reply came quietly. No one remembers. Not even the eldest of the Arcanian sages. But the stories speak of the Echo people. They were said to be the first listeners of the earth, the ones who could hear the breath of stones and the dreams of water. Lucian scoffed, though not dismissively. Sounds like a myth. Maybe. But myths often grow from truths we've forgotten how to understand. The stairwell ended at a large circular chamber, domed and vast. The ceiling arched so high that even the glow of the wall runes failed to reach its summit. In the center stood a stone monolith, blacker than night and veined with threads of glowing amber. Around it, 12 columns formed a ring, each carved with unfamiliar symbols. Lucian stepped closer. The floor pulsed beneath his boots, not a tremble, but a heartbeat. This place, he said, feels alive. It is, Lyra replied. And it remembers. She circled the monolith and stopped at one of the columns. Each pillar marks a trial of spirit. The villa above is your creation. This is the mirror of your soul. Lucian approached the nearest column. Its glyphs seemed to shimmer as he neared, then rearranged into recognizable form, not words, but memories his own. The day he was crowned. The night he chose duty over love. The look on his brother's face when he exiled him after the failed coup. The silence that followed. His hands clenched. Why am I seeing this? Because to enter the vault, you must face not your enemies, but yourself. As she spoke, the central monolith began to glow, its amber veins pulsing brighter, until a faint hum filled the chamber, a note both low and unending, like the beginning of a song the earth had tried to forget. Lyra stepped back. Place your hand upon the stone. Lucian hesitated. Every instinct told him not to. He was an emperor, a warrior, a tactician. He did not follow myths. He forged reality. But still, something deeper pulled at him. He reached out, fingers trembling, and placed his hand against the monolith. In an instant, the world fell away. He was no longer in the chamber. No longer underground. He stood in a field of stars, suspended in darkness. Before him hovered shapes, fragmented memories, echoes of choices past and possible futures. Voices called out. Why did you leave us? You could have changed everything. Even emperors need forgiveness. You built a palace, but buried your heart. Lucian gasped. The vision surged around him. A younger version of himself argued with the council. Another wept beside a grave. Another stood on a battlefield, sword bloody, eyes vacant. Then, one voice cut through it all, soft, ancient, and unknown. You are the builder, but what have you truly built? Lucian fell to his knees. I don't know anymore. Then learn again, the voice said, from the inside out. Suddenly, he was back in the chamber, gasping for breath. Lyra stood over him, eyes searching. You saw something? She asked. He nodded, not trusting his voice yet. Everything. And more. Lyra helped him to his feet. This was only the first layer. There are deeper vaults yet. The Echo people believed that the soul was made of 7 circles, each more hidden than the last. Lucian looked around the chamber. The monolith no longer glowed, but the columns had changed. The glyphs now showed images not of Lucian, but of distant lands, unfamiliar faces, battles he had never fought. What is this? He whispered. Lyra smiled faintly. The second layer, the lives you could have lived. If you had chosen differently. If you were not emperor. If you were free. Lucian staggered back. The realization struck him like thunder. Solarium Villa wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a map of what could be. And the underground chambers were not just echoes of his past, but keys to forgotten futures. The villa reflects you, Lyra said gently. But down here, you begin to reflect it. A sudden rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the unseen ceiling above. Lyra's face grew tense. Something stirs beyond the 3rd seal. What's down there? Lucian asked, his voice hoarse. Not memory, she replied, voice grim. Something deeper. Something waiting. Another rumble, stronger this time. Lucian looked down the hallway that now opened at the far end of the chamber, its arch inscribed with runes that glowed blood red. The vault was no longer quiet. and the journey had only just begun. The red-lit arch loomed ahead, pulsing with a dim, otherworldly glow. The air beyond it shimmered like heat rising from a desert, though the underground chamber remained cool and unmoving. Lucian Valerius stood motionless for a moment, watching as tendrils of red mist curled along the ground beyond the archway. His instincts screamed at him to wait, to gather more knowledge, to understand before acting. But something deeper, some instinct beyond logic, urged him forward. "Do you know what lies beyond this seal?" he asked Lyra, without taking his eyes from the passage. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was hushed. "I've never crossed it. I only know what the Echo Scrolls describe of a place called the Chamber of Broken Names." Lucian turned to her, confused. "Broken names?" "It's said that beyond the third seal, memory fractures. Your name, your identity, everything that roots you, it begins to unravel. Not everyone who enters remembers who they are when they leave. Some never leave at all." He felt a shiver crawl down his spine. "Then why should we go in?" Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fierce beneath her cloak's hood. "Because the tremors we felt, those aren't just echoes. Something old is stirring. Something we may have buried, but not destroyed. If it wakes, the villa won't be the only thing at risk. It's tied to you, Lucian. And if it consumes you, it may spread." Lucian took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. He looked down at his hands, once clean and steady, now stained by time, duty, and the weight of too many decisions. He stepped through the arch. The red light enveloped him, not harsh like fire, but heavy like liquid. The moment he passed the threshold, the world blurred. He was still underground, but the stone walls were gone. Instead, he found himself standing in a hallway made of glass, stretching endlessly in both directions. Beneath his feet was darkness, and above shifting images, like dreams caught in frozen water. "Where is this?" he whispered. But no voice answered. He turned. Lyra was gone. Panic surged briefly in his chest. He called out Lyra. But only the sound of his own name echoed back. Except, it wasn't his voice. "Lucian," came the echo again. And then, another voice, "Valerius." And another, "No. You were once Ilarian. You were once Kale. You were the boy from Selva Hollow." Each name that called out chipped away at something inside him. He felt a strange sensation, like the shape of his own self was beginning to melt. A shimmering reflection appeared in the glass wall beside him. He turned to face it. It was himself, but younger, maybe 20, wearing the armor of a border general. Behind this reflection, he saw an army, a battlefield, the banners of Ilaria burning in the wind. Then the scene changed. Another version, older, cloaked, hands stained with ink. A philosopher, not an emperor. Surrounded by books and scrolls, arguing with sages in the courts of wisdom. In this life, he had never taken the throne. More visions followed, countless possibilities, lives unlived, choices never taken. A child who chose to run instead of stay. A man who chose love over ambition. A father. A farmer. A wanderer. A tyrant. All of them were him. And none of them. The hallway trembled. The glass beneath him cracked. You are not a name, the many voices whispered. You are the sum of your choices. And now, you must choose again. Ahead, the hallway split into 3 paths, each marked by a symbol. A flame. A tree. A mirror. Lucian stepped forward, drawn toward the mirror. He stared into it and saw not himself, but his father, Emperor Cavendius, sitting on a throne of gold, his face cold and unreadable. You were never meant to rule, the vision said. You seized the crown out of fear. You banished your brother because you saw your weakness in him. That's not true, Lucian said aloud. But the reflection leaned closer. Isn't it? Lucian clenched his fists. I've made mistakes. I never denied that. But I've ruled with justice. I've fought for peace. Peace. The mirror pulsed. Then why are your dreams full of war? Why do you wake with clenched fists and call for names long dead? Lucian turned away. He looked to the path marked with the tree and felt something shift. The red mist around him cleared slightly, revealing a faint light at the end of that path. A melody soft and slow drifted from beyond it. It sounded like wind chimes. Or perhaps Lyra's voice, humming an old lullaby. He made his choice. He stepped away from the mirror and into the path of the tree. As he walked, the air changed again. He saw flickers of green, sunlight through leaves. A garden. The Heart Grove, his mother's favorite spot. She used to say that the world spoke more honestly in places where trees grew wild. And in the center of the grove stood a cracked stone pedestal, overgrown with moss. Upon it lay a book, bound in deep blue leather. Lucian opened it. The pages were blank. But as he touched them, words formed not written, but felt. They came from within. He wrote his own name, Lucian Valerius. Then it vanished. And a new name appeared. The Rememberer. A rush of clarity surged through him. The fog lifted. The voices fell silent. He turned. Lyra stood behind him once more, as if she had never been gone. You've passed, she said, her voice reverent. What did I pass? The test of fragmentation. You saw the pieces of yourself. You chose to be whole. Lucian looked around. The red mist had faded. The third chamber behind him was silent now. But something was different. His mind felt sharper. His spirit steadier. And etched faintly along his forearm were now glyphs like tattoos marking his passage through the vault. 3 seals broken. 4 more to go. Lyra looked at him, solemn. We go next to the 4th circle, she said. The Chamber of Echoes. And there, Lucian, the voices won't be yours alone. The descent into the 4th circle was unlike any passage they had taken before. There were no steps, no walls, only a long sloping tunnel carved into obsidian, lit by faint pulses of violet light that moved like veins under a translucent skin. The silence was near total, broken only by the occasional whisper that came from no clear direction. But the whispers weren't just sound. They were names. And they didn't belong to Lucian. Do you hear that? He asked Lyra, walking just ahead of him, her cloak brushing the floor behind her like a shadow. I do, she replied. This is the Chamber of Echoes. Every soul who's ever walked these halls has left something behind. Their regrets. Their truths. Their last thoughts. Lucian's breath caught for a moment as a name passed through the air beside him, written, and he flinched. That name had not crossed his lips in 10 years. His brother. The one he exiled. The one whose face still haunted his sleep. He gritted his teeth and kept walking. The tunnel eventually widened into a sprawling cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness. Around them were stone arches, leading to what looked like hundreds of alcoves carved into the rock. Each one flickered with ghostly light and held a pedestal. As Lucian stepped into the heart of the chamber, the first pedestal came to life. A spectral figure emerged above it, glowing blue-white. It was a woman, eyes sunken but fierce, hair bound in braids that floated as if underwater. Who is she? Lucian asked, already knowing the answer. Her name was Lyra, Lyra replied, a healer who lived here 1,000 years ago. She died protecting this vault from the invaders of the Crimson Order. As if summoned by their voices, the ghost began to speak, not with words, but memories. Images filled the space, fire raining from the sky, screaming children, Lyra's hands glowing with light as she tried to seal a door with her last breath. The vision faded. Another pedestal lit up. A young man, barely older than a boy, stood frozen mid-sob. Lucian approached. This one whispered, I ran. I should have stayed. They all died because I was afraid. Lyra's voice was low. Some echoes relieve their moment of failure forever. Lucian stepped back. The chamber pulsed again, and then a pedestal directly in front of him burst into radiant flame. A new figure rose. And Lucian's heart stopped. It was himself. But not quite. The figure was younger, perhaps 30, with sharper eyes and a crueler posture. He wore regal robes of deep crimson and gold, a crown heavier than any Lucian had ever accepted in this life. This version radiated power and fury. It looked directly at him. "You chose mercy," the echo said with contempt. "I chose dominion. Which of us is remembered in the stars?" Lucian stood his ground. "I don't need to be remembered." The figure sneered. "Then why do you build monuments?" Before Lucian could answer, the ghost of himself vanished. Lyra's eyes met his. "The chamber knows your soul. It reflects what might have been, and what still lingers inside." Lucian turned away. "Let's keep moving." But the chamber had other plans. The central dais at the far end began to rise. From beneath it came a sound not like a whisper this time, but a chorus. 100 voices, layered together, crying out in harmony and dissonance. Some pleaded. Some accused. "You forgot us. You left us behind. Do you still remember the vow?" The lights in the chamber dimmed. The arches behind them closed one by one. And then a name echoed louder than all the others. "Written." Lucian froze. And before him, the air shimmered. From the center of the dais, a figure in black stepped forth. Not a ghost. Not an illusion. It was his brother. Or at least, the memory of him. Written Valerius wore the tattered cloak of a prince gone rogue. His face bore the faint scar from the duel that ended in his exile. And his eyes, still sharp, still burning, pierced into Lucian's. "You sent me away," the vision said. "You said it was for peace. But it was for fear." Lucian stepped forward, fists clenched. "You led men into rebellion. You would have burned Elaria to the ground. I wanted justice." Written shouted. "Not a gilded cage. You took everything Father promised me. He promised you war." Lucian shot back. "And you brought silence." The vision snarled. "Silence to the people. Silence to your own soul." Lucian's chest heaved. The voice was too real. The pain too fresh. "I did what I thought was right," he said, quieter now. "I chose peace over pride." "But at what cost?" Written asked. "How many voices did you silence for the sake of unity?" Lucian fell to his knees. The chamber's chorus surged around him. But then, Lyra stepped forward. She raised her hand. And the chamber began to quiet. She whispered a spell in an ancient tongue, and one by one, the echoes dimmed. The written before them froze. and slowly faded to dust. Lucian gasped. The silence left behind was deafening. Was that really him? He asked. Lyra helped him to his feet. It was a piece of him. Or a piece of you that still carries him. They stood in the center of the now empty chamber. The lights returned. The arches reopened. And carved into the floor beneath them was a new glyph, the bond severed. Lucian looked at it for a long time. What does it mean? It means you've acknowledged the wound, Lyra said. Now, you must learn how to heal it. They moved toward the next passage, the entrance to the fifth vault now emerging etched with a spiral of stars. Lucian paused before stepping through. Do the voices ever go silent? He asked. Lyra's gaze turned distant. No, she said. But they stop screaming once you begin to listen. Together, they walked on deeper into the unknown. The air changed as they stepped through the arch etched with spirals. The stone underfoot softened, taking on a texture like polished crystal. The narrow corridor ahead shimmered with a soft silver hue, and the walls were no longer rock but translucent panels, through which galaxies seemed to swirl like oil in water. Lucian Valerius stopped in his tracks. The passage ahead was no longer confined. It opened up into a dome so vast it seemed to contain the night sky itself. A place suspended between reality and the infinite. He stepped forward slowly, in awe. The dome's walls were a galaxy in motion, planets spun in slow, graceful arcs, comets sailed silently across darkened nebulae, and star systems blinked in and out of existence. There was no ceiling. No horizon. And yet, there was order. In the center of the chamber stood a floating dais shaped like a spiral, wide and curved, like a helix made of starlight. As Lucian and Lyra approached it, the spiral rotated gently, each tier glowing with a different hue: blue, gold, red, white, indigo. Where are we? Lucian whispered. Lyra's voice came in awe. This is the vault of the celestial pattern. The ancients called it the spiral of stars. It's not a chamber. It's a reflection of the cosmic order of fate, time, and memory. Lucian stepped onto the first tier. As he did, stars flickered underfoot, illuminating constellations that pulsed with recognition. And then, he was somewhere else. A battlefield. The banners of Elaria torn and soaked with blood. Screams. Fire. Shadowy figures advancing through smoke. Lucian gripped his blade. He saw himself again leading soldiers, triumphant and merciless. A version of him forged in fear. But this time, as he raised his sword, the stars responded. A light burst from the spiral beneath his feet, and the illusion dissolved. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. The spiral shows you not just what was, but what might have shaped you. Each tier reflects a cosmic decision. A knot in time. Lucian nodded, his heart still racing. He stepped to the next tier. And the stars shifted. Now, he stood in a vast throne room of a future not yet real. His hair was gray, his eyes hollow. Beside him sat no queen, no brother, no friend. Just courtiers with hollow smiles, and gold piled high like offerings before a false god. He heard himself speak, peace through obedience. Legacy through dominance. Lucian flinched. He hated the sound of that voice. Suddenly, the vision changed. A child no older than 10 stood before him, shaking. "Why did you erase their names?" the child asked. Lucian opened his mouth to reply. But no sound came. Then the spiral glowed again, washing away the vision. The chamber pulsed. This vault shows not regrets, not echoes but the architecture of destiny, Lyra explained. It shows what happens when a single decision fractures time. It's not here to accuse you, Lucian. It's here to let you choose again. Lucian steadied himself. This is why the other vaults led here, isn't it? Memory, identity, grief. They were all foundations. Lyra nodded. And now you must choose, what kind of legacy will outlive you. Lucian turned to the next tier. This one was different. It held no visions. Only sound. A symphony played around them, no instruments, only a hum that built into chords, then into melodies. Thousands of voices, some human, some not, interwove in harmonious balance. Then, a single note went off key. One by one, others followed. The harmony shattered. Chaos replaced order. The spiral cracked. Lucian saw it then, how a single injustice, left unchecked, could spiral into rebellion. How a lie could twist into myth. How power, hoarded, would always crumble under its own weight. This wasn't just his fate. This was the fate of nations. Of all things built. And all things forgotten. He clenched his fists, then stepped onto the final tier, the center. There, floating above a pool of liquid starlight, was a small orb. It flickered like a dying sun, pulsing slowly. "What is that?" Lucian asked. Lyra's voice trembled. "Your name. Not as a title. Not as a role. But your true name. The one even you have forgotten." Lucian reached for it. His fingers brushed the orb. And his mind fell into a memory beyond memory. He saw a boy barefoot, laughing, running through a garden that never existed. A mother's hand guiding him. A brother chasing him through summer wind. A voice singing him to sleep with a lullaby older than language. A voice said, "You were not born to rule. You were born to restore." Lucian wept. For the boy. For the dream. For the man he had become and the man he still might be. He opened his eyes. The spiral had gone still. In the silence, a new name echoed across the chamber. Lucian the Rememberer. The title etched itself not into stone, but into the stars above. Lyra stood beside him. She placed a hand to her heart and bowed. "You've passed through the celestial gate," she said. "The fifth seal is broken." Lucian stood taller than before. Not just with strength, but with clarity and purpose. Behind them, a new passage opened, formed from light itself. Beyond it lay the sixth vault. But before stepping through, Lucian turned one last time to the spiral. "Can others walk this path?" he asked. Lyra smiled gently. "Only those who are willing to lose everything in order to remember who they truly are." Lucian nodded. And together, they vanished into the light. The light from the celestial vault slowly faded behind them, narrowing to a thread of silver, then dissolving into the darkness. Ahead stretched a corridor far narrower than any Lucian had walked before, smooth obsidian, featureless and silent. It wasn't carved. It felt grown. As if the path had formed not through stone, but through shadow itself. Lyra walked beside him, her lantern now extinguished. It was unnecessary. The path illuminated itself, dim pulses running along the walls, like veins of a living creature guiding them downward. "The sixth vault," Lucian murmured. "It feels colder." "It should," Lyra whispered. "This is the vault of reflection. The ancients called it umbra speculum. The mirror below." Lucian stopped. "What does it show?" She turned to him, her eyes not fearful, but reverent. "Not what was. Not what could have been. But what you are, when no one is watching." They continued. As the passage narrowed further, Lucian noticed there were no runes, no inscriptions, no voices. Only silence. And then, a doorway appeared. A perfect circle blacker than night. As they stepped through, Lucian felt something peel away from him. Like a layer of armor, unseen but always present. He gasped. His thoughts sharpened. His heartbeat slowed. Every sense became more vivid. Before them was a circular chamber, ringed with tall, dark mirrors. No gold. No torches. No ornaments. Only mirrors. 12 of them, in a perfect ring. But they showed no reflections. Lucian approached the first. For a moment, it remained blank. Then, it flickered. And showed himself. But not as he looked now. He was older, with silver hair, scars down his cheek, and a missing eye. His clothes were tattered, and his left arm bore the mark of exile. This Lucian stared back with anger. "You let the wrong one live," the reflection said. "You forgave enemies who took everything. You chose weakness and called it wisdom." Lucian clenched his jaw but said nothing. The mirror dimmed. He turned to the second. A younger Lucian stood there, blood dripping from a sword, his face blank with shock. He stood over a corpse. A woman. "Lyra," he whispered. The vision vanished. Third mirror. A vision of him on a throne alone, surrounded by lifeless statues. Every face that once smiled at him turned to stone. A kingdom of silence. His mouth opened, and no sound came out. Mirror after mirror, Lucian watched what he feared most. Failing his people. Becoming the tyrant he swore to never be. Choosing silence instead of truth. Letting love die for the sake of legacy. Leaving behind a kingdom that cursed his name. Each mirror didn't accuse. It remembered. They were not lies. They were the truths that clung like barnacles beneath the boat of his soul. Lyra watched him in silence. Then the 12th mirror pulsed. Lucian turned. And this time, there was no reflection. Nothing. Just void. He reached out, fingers trembling. The surface rippled. And then it pulled him in. He stumbled forward. Into a world of shifting smoke, shattered stars, and swirling memory. He was no longer in a chamber. He was inside his own soul. Around him, 1,000 Lucians passed like ghosts, some with crowns, others in chains. Some laughing, some weeping. All alone. "Who are you?" a voice asked from the mist. Lucian spun. And faced himself. Not a reflection. Not a ghost. But the root of him. This Lucian was dressed in simple gray. No weapons. No sigils. Just a man. "You've spent your life seeking peace," the echo said. "But never for yourself." Lucian stepped forward. "Peace isn't for me. It's for the people." "That's not true," the echo replied gently. "You built solarium to escape. You buried pain beneath its beauty. You called it reflection, but it was avoidance." Lucian lowered his head. "I didn't know how to forgive myself." Silence. Then, the echo stepped closer, raised a hand, and touched Lucian's chest. "You don't need to be forgiven," he whispered. "You need to be seen." Lucian gasped. And suddenly, he saw every wound, every grief, every joy, every dream not as something to hide but as something sacred. The mist cleared. The many selves faded, and only he remained. Lucian Valerius, the seeker, the rememberer, the man. When he awoke, he was back in the mirror chamber. Lyra was beside him, tears on her cheeks. "You were gone for hours," she whispered. Lucian slowly stood, his body feeling lighter. Not physically, but in spirit. "I saw everything," he said. And I didn't turn away." At the center of the chamber, the floor pulsed once. A new sigil appeared, a circle surrounded by 12 lines, the whole self. The sixth seal was broken. Lucian walked toward the exit. Lyra followed. But before leaving, he turned once more to the mirrors. They no longer reflected fear. They reflected light. From deep within him. The next chamber waited. The seventh vault. Lyra looked to him, voice quiet but sure. "Only one path remains." Lucian nodded. And whispered, "Let it reveal the truth behind everything." The final passage was unlike the others. It didn't descend deeper or curve inward like the veins of a dream. It ascended. Upward, slow and winding, the narrow steps bathed in a faint golden light that seemed to come from no source. The walls were alive with memory, not etched, not spoken, but felt. As Lucian placed each foot upon the steps, he heard faint voices from his past. Lyra's laughter. Ridden's angry cry. His mother's lullaby. His own heartbeat as a child, asleep beneath the stars in the old olive grove. It was as if the villa itself, the stones, the roots, the winds had been listening this entire time. And now, it was ready to speak back. At the top of the ascent stood a circular archway, made of pure white stone, seamless and warm to the touch. Above it, a single glyph pulsed with quiet energy. "Do you know what that means?" Lucian asked, tracing the glowing sigil. Lyra nodded slowly. "It's the word of origin. The first symbol ever spoken into the world. No one knows how to read it, not with eyes. Only with the soul." Lucian didn't reply. He stepped through the arch. And into the heart of Solarium. It was not a room. It was not even a space. It was a feeling. A sensation of floating, of infinite stillness, and unspeakable clarity. The heart surrounded them, yet did not confine. There were no walls. No ceiling. Only soft, white mist stretching in every direction, illuminated by a sourceless light. At the very center, a tree grew. Its roots extended outward and downward beyond the mist. Its trunk was smooth and dark, older than anything Lucian had ever seen. And its leaves, oh, the leaves, they shimmered like stardust, fluttering in a wind that didn't blow. Lucian approached. The tree pulsed. Lyra stopped a few paces behind, whispering, "This tree is not just alive. It is the soul of Solarium. It grew the moment you dreamt of this place. It remembers every step you took, even before you knew you had taken it." Lucian placed his hand upon the bark. The world vanished. He stood in a courtyard. But not any he remembered building. This was the original Solarium. A vision. A memory. A blueprint born from thought. It was smaller, simpler, just a stone bench, a small fountain, a boy running with a wooden sword, chasing shadows. Lucian. 7 years old. And across from him, sat his father, Emperor Cavantius. Except in this vision, the man was not adorned with royal robes or the weight of command. He looked kind, young, worn. They were talking. Lucian leaned in to listen. "You don't have to be perfect, my son," the emperor said. "You only have to be true." Young Lucian frowned. "But the world wants a king." The emperor smiled. "Then build a place where kings can remember how to be human." Lucian gasped. It wasn't just a childhood memory. It was the seed. The very moment that gave birth to Solarium. Not the physical place, but the idea. A sanctuary where rulers could lay down their crowns. A cradle for the soul. When he opened his eyes, he was back beneath the tree. And its branches were glowing. Lyra stepped closer, her expression soft, reverent. "You found it," she said. "What?" he whispered. "Your origin. The why. The reason Solarium was born. Now the heart knows your truth. And it offers you a gift." The bark beneath his hand split open. A small orb of golden light floated out. Within it pulsed a seed, not of a plant, but of a story. A single tear rolled down Lucian's cheek. "I thought I created Solarium," he said. "But it created me too." Lyra nodded. "The world outside is fractured. But those who carry places like this within them, they are the ones who can mend it." Lucian cupped the light in his palms. And the chamber responded. Suddenly, the mists shifted. Around them formed echoes not of Lucian's past, but of every person who had ever touched Solarium. He saw servants tending the gardens. Lyra training with the old mystic. Architects sketching in the night. Children laughing along the marble halls. Written standing on a balcony, before the fall. Every soul who had loved this place even in silence now returned. They stood in a ring, surrounding the tree, their faces calm, their eyes full of light. Lucian turned to Lyra. "Is this real?" he asked. "It doesn't matter," she said. What matters is that they are seen. That none of them are forgotten. The tree's roots pulsed again. And the light grew brighter. A final glyph formed beneath Lucian's feet, the seal of completion. 7 vaults. 7 truths. And 1 heart unlocked. Outside, on the surface, Solarium Villa stood still in the moonlight. A quiet wind passed through its colonnades. The earth rumbled not with violence, but with release. Something ancient, something beautiful, had awakened. And far below, Lucian Valerius emerged from the heart, his steps slow, his eyes luminous. He no longer walked as an emperor, but as a guardian, a rememberer, a rebuilder. Lyra followed, silent beside him. The final ascent awaited to return to the world above, and to begin again. Lucian emerged from the staircase with slow, deliberate steps. Behind him, the stone archway that led to the heart of Solarium closed not with force, but with grace, like the final page of a sacred text folding shut. He stood once again in the grand atrium of the villa. But it had changed. The pillars, once covered in ivy and ruin, were now adorned with blooming white lilies. The cracked marble beneath his feet had sealed, not as if repaired, but as if the villa had exhaled after centuries of holding its breath. Lyra followed in silence, her silver cloak catching the golden light that now spilled from the skylight dome above. "Is it truly over?" she asked. Lucian didn't speak. He placed a hand on his chest, where the glyph from the heart had etched itself faintly into his skin, the seal of completion. He could still feel its warmth. Not painful. Not burning. Just present. Like a whisper that would never leave. And then, he heard it. Voices. From beyond the garden walls. Not memories. Not echoes. Real ones. Lucian and Lyra pushed open the great cedar doors leading to the outer terrace. The sky had cleared. Where once clouds loomed with heavy silence, now rays of sunlight pierced through, catching upon the restored fountain and wild ivy that danced in the breeze. But more than that, people had returned. Dozens. Then hundreds. From nearby villages, from the edges of the kingdom. Old faces. New. The broken, the exiled, the curious. Drawn to Solarium by something they didn't understand. A pull, a warmth, a dream passed from mind to mind, soul to soul. A young girl stepped forward, no older than 10, her eyes wide as moons. "Is it true?" she asked Lucian. "You made the house glow." Lucian knelt before her. "I didn't make it glow," he said gently. "You did. All of you. Every step we take toward truth, makes the world a little brighter." She smiled and ran off, her laughter weaving through the gathering crowd. Lyra stood beside him, quiet. They don't need kings anymore, Lucian. He nodded. Good. Because I'm not one anymore. What are you, then? He looked out across the gardens, where life had begun to return, and whispered, a keeper of beginnings. In the days that followed, Solarium was reborn. Not as a fortress, nor a palace, but as a living library, a sanctuary of memory. Lucian opened its gates not to nobles or scholars alone, but to wanderers, to orphans, to musicians, and healers and farmers. Anyone with a story? Anyone in search of one? Rooms that once held armor now held instruments. Vaults became classrooms. The atrium became a circle of shared songs and whispered dreams. At the very heart of the villa, Lucian planted the golden seed given to him by the tree. And from it grew a new sapling. Not grand. Not ancient. But alive. Its roots drank from the stones of Solarium, and its leaves listened to the wind. One night, Lucian stood alone on the balcony where his brother, Written, had once challenged the sky. He held a single piece of parchment. A letter. Written long ago, never sent. To my brother. If I fall before you, remember this place. Not for its walls, but for the silence between them. Remember how we used to run barefoot through the halls. How you tried to catch lightning in your hands. I never told you this, but I envied you. You dreamed too big. And I feared you'd break. But now I hope you do. Break the old. Break the chains. Become something new. Lucian folded the letter and released it into the wind. Days turned into seasons. Solarium grew. Not upward. Inward. Its foundations reached across lands unseen not through conquest, but through resonance. Other sanctuaries began to bloom. Other hearts stirred beneath cities and forests. Lucian began to travel again. Not to rule. Not to fight. But to listen. Each place he visited, he left a piece of Solarium behind, a carved stone, a song, a shared story whispered into the ear of a child. He became not a man of legend, but a myth of kindness. One evening, as golden autumn winds brushed through the trees, Lyra found Lucian seated beneath the young sapling in the atrium. He was older now. Lines marked his face, and silver streaked his hair. But his eyes still burned with that same quiet fire. Are you ready? She asked. He looked up. For what? To rest. You've carried Solarium long enough. Others are ready now. Lucian nodded slowly. He stood, placed a hand on the bark of the sapling, and closed his eyes. Then turned to Lyra. "Promise me," he said, "that this place will always welcome those who are lost." Lyra smiled. "It already does." And so Lucian Valerius, the boy who once sought a crown, the man who sought memory, and the soul who found peace, vanished from the world without fanfare. No grave. No statue. Only stories. Stories whispered at twilight by travelers resting in sanctuaries bearing the mark of a spiral, surrounded by lilies and song. And in every such place, if one listens closely, beneath the wind, beneath the silence, one hears a voice. Be true. And begin again. 37 years after Lucian Valerius vanished from Solarium, the world had changed. The kingdoms that once warred endlessly now spoke in council. Wandering cities drifted along sky rails. Temples and fortresses had become libraries and theaters. And in every major city, from the misty cliffs of Veltrun to the emerald groves of Emroth, stood a spiral sanctuary. No banners bore Lucian's name. And yet, the spiral, etched in wood, in stone, in whispers, marked every threshold where story and memory were honored. But there was one spiral sanctuary unlike the rest. Hidden deep within the salt-stained cliffs of southern Malabar stood a circular hall carved directly into the cliff face. No roads led to it. No names were listed on any map. And still, pilgrims found it. It was called the Hollow of Return. And on this quiet dusk, a new pilgrim approached it. She wore a red cloak. Dust clung to her boots. Her hands were wrapped in linen, fingers calloused from both blade and quill. She walked with a limp not from age, but from the kind of battle that doesn't leave visible wounds. Her name was Inora. Half merchant, half mystic, and wholly unsatisfied. She had wandered for years, across burned lands and frozen bridges, gathering stories from dying tongues. Her heart was full of names that no one else remembered. But in her dreams, a single voice called her. A voice she had never met. Come to the hollow, Inora. The spiral is not yet complete. Inside the sanctuary, silence awaited her. But not emptiness. The air hummed with presence. The chamber was circular, stone-carved, and dimly lit by sun crystals embedded in the ceiling. Along the walls stood 12 pedestals, each holding an artifact. Not weapons. Not scrolls. Remnants. A broken sandal. A lock of hair. A quill made from crow feather. A tear crystal. Each marked with one glyph. Lucian. Inora paused before a weathered bench at the center. Upon it lay a journal. Bound in leather. Faint spiral seal. She opened it. And the pages, though untouched for decades, began to glow faintly as her hands made contact. Not with ink. With memory. Words spilled forth not in order, but like a river of thoughts. I was not meant to be a legend. I only ever wanted to remember what others forgot. And to create a place where truth did not need armor. If you find this, you are one of us. Not because of blood, but because of belief. You believe stories matter. That memory can heal. That silence is not emptiness but invitation. Then rise. And begin again. Inora's hands trembled. She had come to bury something, but found herself awakening. For days, she stayed in the hollow. She studied each artifact, each glyph, each whisper carved into the stone walls. Slowly, she pieced together Lucian's life not as a king, nor myth but as a mirror of all human longing. She read of Lyra, and the spiral vaults, of the tree in the heart, of the 12 mirrors that showed not judgment, but possibility. And then, she found something else. Behind the bench, embedded in the stone, lay a sealed compartment. She touched it, and it opened. Inside, a second journal. Its cover blank. The first page read only one sentence. The spiral must be told again. In new words. By new voices. Inora understood. This sanctuary was not an ending. It was a torch, waiting to be passed. She left the hollow that evening, carrying the blank journal and the worn spiral pendant she found beside it. She didn't return to her old home. Instead, she wandered again, this time not just to collect stories, but to plant them. In marketplaces, she left fragments of Lucian's words on folded parchments. In orphanages, she told tales of the vaults and the man who faced his own reflection. In dying villages, she read aloud the lullabies whispered by Lyra to those too tired to stand. And in every corner, when asked who had taught her these things, she answered, a man who remembered, and a place that listened. 10 years later, children across 3 continents spoke of a red-cloaked woman with sky eyes who appeared when hope ran dry. In their drawings, a spiral always curled behind her. No one knew where she slept, or if she aged, or if she was real. And yet every time a story was shared around a fire, a lullaby hummed in the ruins of old cities, or a stone spiral carved beside a forest spring, she was there. And so was Lucian. And so was Solarium. Not as stone, but as echo. Inora stood at the edge of the verdant expanse, a sea of whispering grasslands that glowed faintly under moonlight. The world here was old, unwritten. Her boots sank slightly with every step, not in mud, but in memory. She had traveled far from the hollow of return, carrying with her only 2 things. A blank journal bearing the spiral. A promise. That night, under a canopy of starlight, she opened the journal. And she began to write. Solarium lives. Not in stone or stories alone, but in the way we choose to see others. not as strangers, but as echoes of ourselves. She wrote until her hands ached, until dawn stretched across the sky like a golden ribbon. Then, from the tall grass, a voice broke the silence. "You write like someone trying to remember the world," the boy said. He was no older than 16. Wild hair. Eyes too wise for his age. One arm wrapped in torn bandages. The other clutching a broken compass. Inora turned to face him. "And you speak like someone trying to forget it?" He smirked. "Maybe I am." "What's your name?" The boy hesitated. "They called me Seth." "And what do you call yourself?" He was quiet for a long moment. Finally, "Nothing." "Yet." Inora nodded. "Then let's find it together." Seth followed her. Not out of obedience, but out of longing, the same pull that had drawn Inora to the hollow. As they traveled, she taught him the spiral. Not as doctrine, but as a way of seeing. Every person they met along the road had a fragment of story within them, some hidden, some heavy. And Seth, despite his silence, began to listen. They passed through the salt-cracked town of Alvin, where exiled artists painted murals on sun-bleached walls. Through the fire-scarred ruins of Kareth, where children played music using wind and shards of glass. In each place, Inora asked only one thing. "What would you remember if the world forgot your name?" And she wrote their answers in the journal. One night, after escaping a sandstorm near the Waking Dunes, Seth confronted her. "These stories," he said, "they don't change anything." Inora looked at him, her eyes tired but fierce. "They change you." Seth threw the compass on the ground. "I don't care about being remembered. I care about revenge. For what was taken. For what they did to my village." The night grew cold. Inora said nothing. Instead, she handed him the journal. "Then write it." Seth stared. "Write the pain. Write the names. Make the world remember why it must change." And for the first time, Seth wrote. He didn't stop. Not that night. Not the next. He filled pages, burned memories, bitter names, broken trusts. And with each word, his hands trembled. But when he reached the end, he didn't feel heavier. He felt lighter. Because for the first time, the pain wasn't only his. It had been witnessed. Weeks later, they reached a valley ringed by blue leaf trees. No buildings. No maps. Just silence. Seth paused. This place. Inora nodded. You feel it? He did. A hum beneath the soil. A pulse in the stones. It was a dormant sanctuary. Untouched. Waiting. Together, they began to build. Not with hammer and stone, but with voice and presence. Enora carved stories into bark. Seth taught songs to passing pilgrims. They called it, Resonara, the place that echoes. The sanctuary grew not outward, but inward. People came, shared, cried, remembered, and left behind a piece of themselves. Years passed. Enora aged. Seth did not leave. He no longer sought revenge. He became the voice of Resonara, its fire keeper, its memory guide. And when Enora's eyes dimmed one twilight, as she lay beneath the starlit canopy of blue leaves, she took Seth's hand. "Now you carry it," she whispered. "The spiral." She smiled faintly. "No. The invitation." And so Seth, no longer nameless, became the next storyteller. He did not wear robes. He carried no books. He simply walked the roads, asking the same question Enora once did. What would you remember if the world forgot your name? And the spiral lived on. Not as a symbol, but as a choice. A promise. A rekindled light. 500 years later. In the heart of what was once the kingdom of Arcanes, the land had changed beyond recognition. Towering crystalline forests had taken root where citadels once stood. Airships now sailed above silver rivers. Cities no longer had names, only songs, and people carried memories not in stone, but in sound, gesture, and story. But one thing remained. The spiral. Its symbol, sometimes drawn on a child's palm with ash, sometimes carved into a tree beside a traveler's resting stone. It had no origin to those who saw it, now only feeling. A quiet pull towards something ancient. Something unfinished. In the eastern skies of the floating region of Narrated, a storm surged violently, devouring cloud and light alike. The people called it the Void Pulse, a seasonal rift that sometimes revealed relics from the past. One day, after the storm passed, a child named Kale wandered to the edge of a floating cliff. He was a dreamer. Quiet. A collector of fragments, broken machine parts, faded glyphs, lost lullabies. His parents called it a distraction. But Kale believed old things had souls. That morning, glinting in the storm-scraped mud, he found a shard of obsidian. Perfect spiral engraved at its center. Cold to the touch, but humming softly in his hand. He had no words for it. Only instinct. He held it to his ear. And the wind whispered, "Be true. And begin again." That night, Kale couldn't sleep. Dreams flooded his mind, cities made of light and memory, a tree with golden leaves that whispered names, a man in armor kneeling before silence, a woman with a red cloak singing to the stars, and a boy standing in fire, weeping ink onto a blank page. They were not visions. They were remnants. Kale awoke with a single purpose: to find where the spiral began. His journey was unlike those before. The world now floated in fragments, levitating isles, shifting rivers of wind, tunnels of memory sealed in glass. Kale traveled through each, collecting more spiral remnants, old songs from wandering monks, a pendant from a sleepwalker, a single phrase carved on a cliff. Memory is the soil of all beginnings. He met others like him. A girl who could hear forgotten stories in rain. A blind elder who spoke only in riddles that made children weep. A machine who recited the same tale every day but changed its ending depending on who listened. Each time, Kale asked, "What would you remember if the world forgot your name?" Each time, a new piece of the spiral returned. Eventually, Kale found himself in the ruins of Solarium. The name had been lost to time, spoken now only in echo. He stood before a half-sunken vault overgrown with dream vine, its stones glowing faintly beneath moss. The structure barely held, yet the spiral on its gate burned bright, as if it had never aged. Inside, the sanctum heart pulsed. Kale stepped into it. The chamber lit up. He was not alone. A voice, warm and familiar, filled the air. "You came." Kale turned. No one. But the walls, they shimmered. Images danced in the dust: Lucian, Lyra, Inora, Seth. Their faces flickered, faded, then returned again, smiling. "The spiral never ends," said the voice. "It only waits." Kale placed the obsidian shard on the central altar. A pillar of light erupted from the stone, and the spiral glyph expanded across the floor, glowing not with power, but with invitation. And suddenly, from the sanctum ceiling, crystal threads unraveled: holograms, dreams, echoes containing all the memories that had ever been shared in the name of the spiral. Lucian's journal. Inora's lullabies. Seth's sorrow-born songs. Countless nameless pilgrims' voices, woven together into a vast tapestry of becoming. Kale fell to his knees, tears in his eyes. He understood. The spiral wasn't a history. It was a system of remembrance. A promise from those before to those not yet born. That no memory was too small. That every soul mattered. The next morning, Kale began rebuilding Solarium. Not alone. From across the sky isles, others came, drawn not by announcements or banners, but by dreams. The sanctuary returned. Its walls reshaped by music. Its roof built from shimmering mist stone. Its halls filled not with laws, but with questions. Each pilgrim who entered was asked only one. What do you carry that no one else can remember for you? Years later, Cale grew old. His voice never raised. His face never painted on walls. And yet, in the lull between dusk and dark, when young apprentices of the spiral lay beneath starlit ceilings, they told tales of a child who listened to rocks, a sanctuary that breathed, a whisper that began everything. And they carved one phrase into the soft earth beside every resting stone. Be true. Begin again. You are the spiral now. Blue Book title, The Spiral of Becoming. Open Book description. In a world where memories are more powerful than kings and silence speaks louder than war, a fallen emperor named Lucian Valerius seeks redemption in the forgotten sanctuary of Solarium. Guided by the mysterious seer Lyra, he descends into an underground labyrinth where every vault is a mirror of his soul and every echo, a forgotten choice. But Lucian's journey is only the beginning. Generations later, a red-cloaked mystic named Inoa rekindles the spiral's light, passing its silent wisdom to a broken youth named Seth. Through stories, tears, and sacred places, they rebuild not just sanctuaries but the very idea of what it means to be remembered. Centuries beyond, in an age of floating cities and whispering winds, a child named Cale hears the spiral call once more. And in answering it, he ensures that the most powerful legacy is not carved in stone, but passed from heart to heart. The Spiral of Becoming is an epic tale of memory, redemption, and the stories that shape us, an ever-turning cycle of beginnings, endings, and the invitation to begin again.